Good day and welcome to my Witchcraft History Series. Today I wanted to get into the Norse. The use of magic or witchcraft was known throughout the ancient Germanic and Teutonic people who lived in much of the Northern Europe. Their practices seem quite familiar to those who know anything of the traditions of witchcraft. They involved in the making of wax or dough figures and using needles, fire, or water to inflict harm upon the person whom the figure represented. The Visigoths in Europe, meanwhile, found it necessary to pass laws in the 6th century that was set out the punishment for those storm makers who went around threatening to ruin a farmer's crops unless he paid up the protection money. Elsewhere, Anglo-Saxon magic ranged from simple charms to removing warts to elaborate spells aimed at destroying enemies. However, one of the biggest preserved traditions of Northern Europe was the form of magic known as Seithr in the Norse tradition and culture. This kind of sorcery was widespread and was described in one of our principal sources of knowledge about Norse mythology, the Edda, written by the 13th century Icelandic historian Sturluson. Seithr was carried out largely at night and mostly by women, known as vulvas. In folklore, they are supposed to have ridden out at night on animals such as wolves or bears, or on wooden rails to meet other vulvas, nightly meetings that were later equated by Christians with the Sabbats, the seasonal festival of witches. In historical terms, the real practice of Seithr has been likened to that of shamanistic magic. It usually involved a woman sitting on a platform or high seat, and then attaining a trance-like state. Sometimes the singing of spells or chanting was used to help induce their trance. In this state, she would answer questions using the famous information that came from her trance state to provide answers. This type of sorcery was often used for forecasting the weather and seasons and for predictions of love between a young couple. Sometimes Seithr was associated with harmful magic, but more often was this kind of helpful divination. In the Icelandic work, Eric's Saga, the Saga of Eric the Red, a vulva was described as wearing a costume of animal skins, which included gloves made from cat skin and boots fashioned from calf skin. A ceremonial meal was also prepared, made from the hearts of a variety of animals. The sorceress then sat on a cushion high up on a platform, and a young woman came forward to sing the correct spell to help the vulva go into her trance. This young woman was apparently now a Christian, but had learned the words of the spell while a child. In the story of older women, then answered questions about the topic also concerning the community, namely the famine they were suffering. Later, she gave more personal answers to individuals about their lives, including predicting the love life of the young woman who sang the spell. The story gives an interesting insight on how these vulvas were viewed by society, almost as a public consultation service. Other stories indeed suggest they went around the countryside, visiting farms and local communities, telling fortunes and providing other valued information. Sometimes they went around in groups. In one account, a group of 9. However, not all the accounts in Norse culture of the traveling seers are so benign. It could also involve harmful magic. One story of an early king of Sweden describes his being crushed to death by a sorceress who has taken the time and the form of a horse. Another story tells of a witch who was put on trial in Iceland for riding a man to death in a similar way. But many of the stories of these traveling seers or witches are positive. This may explain by the fact that Christianity came much later to parts of Scandinavian than most of the rest of Europe. And so the stories have less of a usual suspicion of the magical practice that was typical in subsequent Christian depictions. The Norse goddess most associated with Sithur is Freya. She is a twin sister of Frey and was said to be the most renowned of goddesses in the Norse pantheon, as well as being very beautiful. The chronicler Snorri, writing in the 13th century, said she was the only one of the gods who survived and is still worshipped to that time. As might be expected of such a powerful goddess, Freya was associated with a number of different aspects. She was connected with sexual passion, with magic, with death, and with fertility. On these last two, there is an interesting story of how Freya mourns her husband, Udur, who appears to have died. As she weeps for her loss, the land goes cold and barren. This represents the coming of winter. Freya goes in search of her husband and eventually finds him. They return home, whereupon the spring returns. This is a familiar story in mythology depicting the ebb and flow of the seasons. Moreover, as we have seen in earlier audio videos that I put together, the idea of a mother goddess and her male consort who dies and then is reborn is central to much of the modern witchcraft. Snorri clearly identified Freya with magic or Sithur, and she is credited with introducing this to others. Like the Volvas, she was also noted for traveling, often in the form of a falcon. More curiously still, Freya, who also connected with cats and was said to travel in a carriage drawn by a number of them. Freya has also been linked to another Norse goddess, Frigg, the wife of the supreme god Odin. Frigg, like Freya, was associated with childbirth, and the two of them are sometimes seen as being two aspects of the triple goddess, a phenomena already referred to in the context of Greece and Rome. The goddess Skadi, who was connected with hunting, may have made up the third aspect. Odin himself was also closely identified with magic. The Great One, the great-eyed all-father god, also known as Wotan in other parts of Europe, was among other things the god of magic. Among the many stories told about Odin, it is one in which he sacrificed one of his eyes in return for great wisdom and magical knowledge. In some depictions of the god, a knot is shown, symbolizing his magical ability to bind and unbind men's souls. The use of knots to bind or release energy in spells is a theme common to many religious traditions. I hope you enjoyed this audio about magic in the Norse. I will have more information and cultural magic posted further along once I'm finished the history of witchcraft timeline. If you did enjoy this video and would like to learn more about witchcraft, feel free to start at part 1 for the actual timeline and how witchcraft has evolved. And if you enjoyed this video, please like it and subscribe to my channel. Have a great day. Thank you for listening. Many blessings to you.